Hi guys, I hope you're all well. So this video is going to be a little bit more off the cuff, so to speak. It's a topic that I've kind of been thinking about a little bit more for the last couple of days, and I thought I might just kind of turn on the camera and start talking and see where I go with it. So the topic is the relationship and the tensions that arise sometimes in that relationship between religion and science. This is something that is really integral to my spirituality, and it kind of always has been, certainly in the last couple of years while I've been really coming to get into grips with my spirituality and building a practice for myself. As a naturalist, I try to base as many of my beliefs as possible on science. I've said before that my beliefs aren't really an important thing to me when it comes to spirituality, or just in general. I try not to hold on to rigid ideas too much. I try to be kind of open-minded and to accept that we really don't understand that much about the universe and how it works. But this notion of the kind of problematic relationship between science and religion is something that I've always had to have some sort of take on or get to grips with, because I came at religion or spirituality from a point of view of being very much sort of grounded in a scientific understanding of the world. And when it comes down to it, if I'm trying to figure out how something works, if I'm trying to decide if I believe in something, or if I buy into a certain line of thinking, if I'm trying to learn more about the world, about the universe, about anything, my first base, the first place I will come to, it will be scientific thought, scientific research, and a sort of a scientific way of coming at these questions. And I suppose in sort of shifting from my a-religious phase and my atheism into a spiritual and religious pantheism, I suppose you could say that I was moving away from my strictly scientific view of the world into something that is a little bit more mystical, a little bit more spiritual. But I can't say that I've ever really completely seen it that way. I've never really seen it as a move away from science. And I don't think that the two things were ever really, for me, from a very early age, two completely different entities. From the age of about 3 or 4, from whenever my father, particularly my father, both my parents, but my father probably more than my mother, started talking to me about the universe, how it works, the solar systems, how big it is, infinity, and concepts like this. I had I had this sort of insatiable thirst for knowledge about the universe and how it works, and I felt a great deal of awe and reverence in the face of these huge questions that from a very early age it became obvious to me that nobody had the answers to. I wasn't a particularly religious child, even though I was technically brought up as a Catholic, but any of my sort of religious teachings were all just learned in school, and the teachers didn't take it particularly seriously, I don't think. It was just something that was on the syllabus. It was something that they had to do to kind of, you know, we did our first communion when I was 7 years old, and I was confirmed at the age of 11 and all that, so it was kind of built into the school system. So to me it was just a part of that. It was part of my education, and it wasn't really something I questioned for quite a long time. But I suppose at that early age I didn't really see the link between these ideas of God, and the very hazy ideas of God and religion that I was getting from school. I wasn't really coming up with any particular way of seeing it, or I wasn't really associating those stories that we were learning in school about Jesus and God with the sort of awe and amazement that I felt when I watched television programs with my parents about science and the universe and cosmology. And I'm not sure that even when I first came across paganism and Wicca, that was a link that I immediately made. certainly by the time I was about 18, I had come across the idea of pantheism, and it was becoming something that I was interested in. But I think it was only when I finally got down to really very seriously deciding how I could shape a spirituality for myself that I realised how much the two things are completely intertwined. I think because science has become a part of day-to-day life for ordinary people, I don't think it's possible to really extricate it now from religion, because it's just a part of our day-to-day lives. Ordinary people know a certain amount about basic scientific facts, basic scientific ideas and theories and concepts. Everybody's familiar with the ideas of the Big Bang and evolution and things like that. And I'm not going to get into the whole issue of whether or not some more fundamentalist religious people might decide that they don't believe in those largely proven scientific theories. That's a whole other question that is probably too big for me to get into right now. So I honestly find it quite strange when I come across again and again this idea that a lot of people seem to have, that science and religion are just completely different things, that they don't meet, they don't touch, that they are two different worldviews or two different components of people's lives or their ways of thinking, and that they just don't touch at all. I find that incredibly strange because I don't see how that can be. If most people hold scientific beliefs, if they, buy into these scientific theories, if they believe that the world is round, that that the universe is as big as we currently understand it to be, that the laws of science work the way they work, and etc., etc., then there isn't really a way to put that aside, and I don't think there's any need to put that aside when you're then deciding that you want to view the world in a religious way. Surely the two things should just inform each other. If you're talking about your scientific view of the world and your religious view of the world, surely that is really just one and the same thing. And I think if it's not, I think if somebody, and perhaps this is the way it works for some people, if somebody has a way that they see the world that is there's the scientific way, and then another way they see the world that is the kind of more mystical religious way of seeing it, how does that come together for them in their mind? I'm not exactly sure. I suppose maybe for some people it's the idea of the split between matter and spirit, that the science explains the matter that we experience, whereas the religion and things about God and spirits and angels and saints and deities, whatever it is that they believe in, that is their explanation or their worldview on the spirit aspect of things. But for me, and I think for quite a lot of pagans and quite a lot of religious people in general, that differentiation just isn't there. As I said before, to me that spirit side of things just isn't there at all. And it's not to say that I don't believe in anything or see anything that isn't that is remotely like that, but to me it's just all part of the all. It's all part of one and the same. So my scientific view of the world and my religious view of the world is one and the same. It can't be pulled apart, and you can't really, there's no way of really extricating them in a way that makes sense, that either of them on their own will make sense. I think when I was coming into embracing pantheism at first, in the past, say 6 months or so, or maybe a year, I found it useful to make that distinction, and I said this before in previous videos, between a logical atheism and an emotional pantheism. So perhaps that was my way of splitting the two, but perhaps there was some distinction being made there, that there was a scientific view of the world going on in which I said, oh well, there's no evidence of a personal God, therefore I don't believe in it. And then on the other hand, my religious view of the world that said, but I feel as though the cosmos is divine. I don't really think that making that strict division is really helpful or accurate at all in describing how I see the world. To me, it really is just, it all just comes together in one kind of big mash of ideas and notions, and any of my kind of more spiritual ideas are they're generally inspired by science. They're generally inspired by scientific theories that I heard, and vice versa. Absolutely. And I love making connections between the two. I love thinking about things like dark matter and dark energy and connecting that to ideas about the all or Gaia or things like that. I was reading a blog post actually today, purely by coincidence, as I'd been thinking about this a bit last night, and that was kind of talking about the relationship between religion and science, and somebody commented on it, and they quoted an Albert Einstein quote, which was talking about the religion of the future being a cosmic religion, that it will have to be a cosmic religion. And for Einstein, actually I have it here, and I can read out little bits of it. So for Einstein, this future cosmic religion, he thought that it should transcend a personal God and avoid dogmas and theology, and that it should cover both the natural and the spiritual, and be based on a religious sense arising from the experience of all things natural and spiritual, and a meaningful unity. I definitely like this idea a lot, but I think I find the idea of transcending a personal God entirely to be slightly problematic. I know an awful lot of naturalistic religious people and naturalistic pantheists and so forth. I know that they dislike the idea of even personification at all in any shape or form. But although I don't believe in a literal personal God, I think throwing out the idea completely isn't necessarily useful. I think it's always going to be important to the human psyche to personify abstract concepts when they're trying to engage with them in a spiritual or a religious setting. I think there's definitely a reason why so many naturalists do actually decide to engage with personified deity or personified concepts, because it just allows them to feel engaged and connected in a way that just it isn't so easy to do without that personification. And I've talked about that in my previous video about deities. But yes, absolutely, Einstein's vision of this cosmic religion is very much what I'm living right now. This kind of combination of the natural and the spiritual, and it's definitely not for me a God of the gaps or anything like that. It's not that I look at science and say, well, science can't answer this, this and this for me, so therefore I'm going to fill those gaps with magical thinking or mystical thinking or anything like that. I think perhaps it's just there is the emotional aspect, I suppose, that I don't feel emotionally complete unless I'm addressing these concepts from a religious standpoint, unless I'm addressing them as myths, as personified deity. I just feel as though something's missing in my view of the world and in my day-to-day existence. I think it's very important for people to find a way of understanding the universe. And whether that is finding some form of God or just finding a scientific way of understanding, a way of getting their minds around scientific theory. I don't think it matters so much what way they do it. I think what's important is that we can find ourselves a story with which we can engage, a story that is meaningful for us, and a story that allows us to place ourselves within the universal context. And I think now more than ever, it's kind of vital for people to be able to bring their scientific thinking and their religious thinking together. As science has progressed, as we've learned more about the universe has sort of expanded for us. I think people forget this, that over the past couple of 100 years, say, our concept of the universe has completely changed, and our place within it has completely changed. People would have always understood that the sun and the moon and the stars were all very far away, and there certainly would have always been this feeling of the world being very large and the human being very small within it. But certainly, as we understand more about the universe, we see more and more how huge it is, how vast it is, and certainly the current estimated size of the universe is just goes way beyond anything that anybody a couple of 100 years ago, or even 100 or 200 years ago, could possibly have imagined. The concept of the Big Bang is also surprisingly relatively new, and it wasn't really that long ago that people were still seeing the universe as being entirely static. And all of this has a huge impact on our own self-identity, our understanding of where we stand in the world, what our place is, and I think it has really serious repercussions for our sense of identity, our sense of self, and really our happiness in our lives. I feel as though we can become very lost within this vast universe, this vast kind of cold mechanistic universe that science has started to portray to us. There's become sort of less and less room for a conservative way of thinking, for fundamentalist religion, and for the idea of personified deity. The more and more that people embrace science and embrace scientific discoveries and theories, the more and more that those religious ideas kind of become pushed to one side. But I think there's a really great danger in that. We've developed the way that we have, and there's no way that we can just shake all of that off within the space of a couple of 100 years. Humans absolutely need myth and religion. And I think people aren't trying to create these stories for themselves anymore. They sort of accept that there are scientists out there that are working on the problem, and I think an awful lot of people just sort of let it go. And they don't even anymore, a lot of them don't even have their religion to fall back to. Some of them might go to church or mass or whatever it is that they go to, whatever religion it is that they're a part of. They might partake in those weekly Sabbaths or kind of biannual celebrations, but without any meaning or depth to it. It sort of becomes a bit of a hollow gesture. I think those hollow gestures are often better than nothing. Rites of passage and things like this, I think they're very, very important for humans, and I think it's good not to let go of them entirely. But people an awful lot of people, although they're still sort of on the surface engaging with these religions, an awful lot of them have let go of the belief behind it, and they're not really using these religions as a way of orienting themselves, or really finding meaning for themselves within the world. And I think people's sense of self definitely suffers as a result. I had a kind of realisation last night about what I want to do with my life, which is a pretty big subject, and it's something that I've really been grappling with for the past year or more. What I want to do with my life and my spirituality have been from the outset really intertwined. I think as I was struggling towards finding a meaningful practice for myself and a meaningful story of the universe that I could engage with, I was also simultaneously figuring out, is this something that I can do? Is this something that I can devote my life to? Because it was so important to me, the journey was so important to me, that I couldn't imagine not wanting to help other people on that path too. And the more time that goes on, the more that becomes important to me. Certainly. It's starting to become a very important thing for me in my writing. I've always considered myself to be a writer, but I've always imagined that I would be a novelist, and very definitely a literary novelist. I am kind of working on a novel. I've got several ideas kind of on the go, and it's something I definitely come back to, but I'm starting to realise that it's not my main passion in life. Novels aren't even my main passion in writing. I will always be a writer. I'm always writing some form of blog. I'm always writing down my thoughts, thinking about ways of how I might express whatever it is that I'm passionate about at that moment in time. And it's becoming more and more important to me to try to figure out how I'm going to write about my spirituality and how I'm going to share it with others. I kind of realised last night that perhaps one of the things I want to do is to help people find their own story of the universe, to help people engage with not only science but also mythology and religion and really anything that they have picked up during their lives, any little bits and pieces, and it doesn't particularly matter if it's true or not true. I definitely think truth is important, and scientific truth is important, and personal truth is important, but I think when it comes to creating an authentic story for yourself and an authentic context in which you can sort of place yourself and feel your place in the world, I don't think that literal truth is the most important thing. I think the most important thing is that it resonates at some really deep level. That they are stories or concepts that really ring true to you and that really make your heart sing. That's absolutely the most important thing. So I think that pretty much anything can be pulled into this personal, universal story. But most of all, I think it's really important for people to do this. I think people don't even realise that this is what they're missing in their lives. And maybe it's not something that everybody will feel drawn to do at any point in their lives, but I think most people will probably reach a point at some time, when they realise that they have a need to do this. And whether it manifests itself as a specific religion or not isn't really important. I think if somebody finds that sense of self and completion and oneness with the universe purely in scientific thought, then that's absolutely fine, as long as they don't feel like there is something missing from that. So those are just a few of the thoughts that I've been having on science and religion recently, my most recent thoughts, I suppose you could say. I'm sure it's a subject that I'll come back to, and maybe some of the things that I've touched on I'd quite like to delve into them a little bit more at a later stage. But I hope that was helpful to some of you, and thanks for listening, guys.